Woodcraft, helping you make woodwork.
Scroll sawing paper cutouts, and that's more like just stack cutting. And what you do is you just take some paper, and with this I took 11.5 by 8.5 by 11 sheets, cut it in thirds, and put it between two 1/8-inch pieces of plywood. Now, when I found this in a magazine, and they said, oh, don't do the cardboard. I did originally try it with the cardboard, and it doesn't work because it gets too floppy. And so what happens when you get them is you can use it to make cards. So I did this, and I've got these little roses. These are actually cut out of paper and then wound up, and I'll show you how that's done. And you could even, I tried one with a scroll saw Christmas ornament pattern. And so if you have some girly girls who like pink and purple, you could give this to them so they could make their pink and purple Christmas cards. Then the last scroll saw magazine I got said, here's a stocking stuffer idea. You can take Post-it notes and scroll saw names or initials in them. The one I had was the name, and there's Nick. But Rosemary's name was a little long. I thought, well, I'll just try the initial. And if any of you know attorneys, they always go by their initials. So you could do the initials, the attorneys, or, any other person's initials. So the way you do this is just, like I said, the Post-it note, which I think is probably the most practical application. You just find a couple, pardon?
You get that wrapped in
Yeah.
plastic wrap?
Yeah, what I did is I found a couple pieces of scrap plywood, put one on the back and on the front. You want to do that otherwise the paper's going to tear in the back. And then just wrap it with tape. You can use blue painter's tape too. And then I glued the name on top because I found if it's underneath the tape, I get glare, and it's kind of hard to follow. So with this, then you just take it, and you do have to drill an entry hole. And if you have a DeWalt saw, one of the things you can do is when I had a DeWalt, I had a 2x4 piece of wood I'd put underneath the arm to hold it up while I worked. My Excalibur now, the arm stays up, and I think the current DeWalt's, the arm will stay up. And then I just put it in, and I liked to thread from the bottom to the top. There are others, they thread from the top to the bottom. I find it easier to get the blade back in on the top than on the bottom. Then I'll just tension it. And at home I have a foot pedal I use with my saw, so I have to remember to use the switch. And then it's just a matter of cutting it out. Pardon?
What kind of blade are you using?
This is a 5-inch, it's a number 5 crown, Olson number 5 crown. There's different varieties of blades, different sizes. The finer the wood, the finer the blade you use, and the coarser the wood, the bigger the blade. So the smaller the number, the smaller the blade. You can get like a 1/0, and there's even smaller ones that jewelers use for very fine cutting. So this I found, they said to use a number 2 blade in the instructions. I found this number 5, which I had home, worked a little better because the number 2 just kept breaking on me. Yeah, it was, for this amount to go through, it was just too much for that little blade. And also, this one works well, and it leaves a clean cut. And so it works, I always say just use what works for you. Whoop. It came loose on the bottom. So I'll just retension it. Okay. And one of the things when you're scrolling with these smaller blades, it doesn't hurt to stop and let the tension off and then retighten, because these blades tend to stretch when you first start with them. And with the blade stretches, it gets loose and it's not cutting as well as when it's tight. It's just letting the, as you cut, you just kind of let the wood feed in. Don't push too hard, especially with this width. I'll get this out of there. So you notice I've discovered little pieces of yellow paper tend to go all over the place with this. But the sawdust isn't too bad, or the paper dust. And this blade will be a good for about maybe one of these and maybe a little bit more. The paper really dulls the blade quickly. And I buy my scroll saw blades by the gross. Oh, they're a lot cheaper than buying them 10 at a time. I could buy a gross for about the same package as maybe a dozen. So, okay. Okay, here we go. And you can see it goes really quickly. And if you go off a little bit, no big deal. You just pretend that was part of the cut pattern. And you can stay on the inside and come back and clean up a little bit if you want to. Make it a little better. I'm going to stop it right now. And you can see how it's gotten looser, so I'm going to just tighten it back up. I should have demonstrated that. So it will start cutting a little better again. Now this end has a really tight curve, so I'm just coming back and I'm going to cut out this part and then come back in and get the rest of the tip of the end. And that's okay because there's a lot of waste in here. I'm just going to do it this way. And now I'm going to come back in here and get this little piece I did earlier. And I'm going to take a peek here and see how it's looking. And it needs a little work in there. Oh, come on.